Thank you for joining us today. I'm honored to have back with me someone who I consider a very dear friend and someone who is an incredible patriot, General Tom McInerney. For 35 years, General McInerney served as a pilot, commander, and strategic planner in the United States Air Force. Tom retired from military service as Assistant Vice Chief of Staff of the Air Force and Director of Defense Performance Review, reporting to the Secretary of Defense. General McInerney graduated from the United States Military Academy and earned a master's degree in international relations from George Washington University. Tom also attended the Armed Forces Staff College and the National War College. It's my honor to welcome back General Tom McInerney. Tom, welcome back to Operation Freedom.
Thank you, Dr. Dave. Great to be with you today.
So, Tom, I want to take you back to March 19th, 2017. You, with the support of Admiral Ace Lyons, one of your best friends in the world, stepped forward and shook the inner core of the deep state and Washington, D.C. to its knees when you spoke about an illegal surveillance platform called the Hammer, which was essentially usurped by Obama with the support of Brennan and Clapper to illegally surveil not just people in the government, not just political opponents, but millions of Americans. Tom, it's been quite a journey since that radio show on March 19th, 2017.
It really has, Dave, and just for the benefit of your listeners, Admiral Lyons had mentioned it to me less than an hour before I went on line with you. And it was breaking news. I thought it was significant enough, as did Admiral Lyons, is to make sure that we broadcast it on your show and got it out right away. It turns out that we were absolutely spot on.
And this was based on really some great work from investigative journalists Mary Fanning and Alan Jones that really broke open the story several days before that on the illegal surveillance performed by Obama, Brennan, and Clapper. And in fact, Tom, it rattled them so much that when Department of Justice Inspector General Michael Horowitz released the text messages between Strzok and Page, those two lovely subversives that were involved in the attempted coup of President Trump, it turns out that they were speaking in those text messages just about an hour or so after our live broadcast about what you and Admiral Lyons brought forward on Operation Freedom.
Which means the Obama administration, FBI, and intelligence sources are listening to you a lot. Enough said, huh?
Well, you know what? It makes me. Actually, some people say, does that upset you? Oh, absolutely not. My goal, Tom, as is your goal, is to make their lives a living hell until they pass to hell. Because what they have done to our country, to every American, to every person of the world is beyond reprehensible.
Absolutely. And you know, I commend Mary Fanning and Alan a great deal for their new book, and I'll plug it right now. And people ought to get it. You can get it on Amazon, and it's a great read. But it shows one of the without a doubt, Dave, the greatest attack against our democracy in our history. There has been no greater corruption than what the Obama administration went right into President Obama's office and with Vice President Biden. They were both intimately involved, and it goes right to the crux of our democracy. They were spied on, as President Trump has said, and said it before. He had good sources. The director of National Security Agency informed him the day after he was elected that they were spying on him. And it was very important what the admiral did. But this is still dragging out, which is disturbing me greatly, to Mary's book and all the other books that have been written on it, and radio shows, etc. We know enough. So why hasn't John Durham brought more people to justice? And that's what's disturbing me a great deal. They're taking too much time, and people like John Brennan, Jim Clapper, all the others, they should be in front of a grand jury right now, and that we ought to be executing. It must be done before the election so it is never done again. We cannot emphasize it enough, and you have been on it with ruthless integrity.
Well, that's very kind, Tom, coming from someone like you. Yeah, you mentioned Mary Fanning and Alan Jones' book. The title of the book is "The Hammer is the Key to the Coup: The Political Crime of the Century." It is available on Amazon, as you mentioned, Tom. And it just the very first sentence there actually are really dedicated to you and Ace for bringing this forward. Because if it were not for you and Admiral Lyons, this would have been deep-sixed and no one would know about it. And now we had Rick Grinnell essentially talking about the hammer at the RNC convention. Sidney Powell, the phenomenal attorney for General Flynn, has spoken about it on network television several times. And here's what they wrote about you and Admiral Lyons. This is in the introductory words of the introductory overview of The Hammer is the Key to the Coup. During his last days on Earth, U.S. Navy Admiral James Ace Lyons, former commander of the U.S. Navy Pacific Fleet, seemed less concerned about dying than about stopping the coup d'etat against President Trump. As Admiral Lyons lay in his deathbed, he reached over to his longtime and trusted friend and fellow Cold Warrior, U.S. Air Force Lieutenant General Tom McInerney, and said, "Tom, the hammer is the key to the coup," end quote. Ace was right on target, Tom. It was the key to the coup. It's the key to General Flynn's freedom. It's the key to the future of our country, the exposure of the illegal. That's what was used to control people within government and outside of government.
And that's why Mary's book and Alan's book is so important. To just refresh to our listeners, Admiral Lyons passed away on a Monday. I went down to see him on the Sunday, the day before he passed away. I was the last person to see him in face-to-face and talk to him, and that was his concern. Little did I know he was in the ICU there in Warrington. Little did I know that he was going to pass away because he was such a fighter. But that was his concern. And what a patriot and what a humble, great American he was to the day he died, be so interested to make sure that this never happens to the U.S. again. It can never happen, and that's why the Durham is not a report. It's his action to get these people in front of courts and get them tried, that it never happens again. And unfortunately, Vice President Biden was intimately involved, and Sidney Powell has talked about it. Of course, Rick Grinnell, who has just been fantastic on it, on getting air out, as well as this morning, John Ratcliffe, the DNI, talked about it on Maria Bartiromo, and more about getting this information. You wonder why his predecessors did not, but the fact is it's coming out. It should come out, and the American people must know what Vice President Biden was involved with, and his intimate involvement with a coup d'etat along with President Obama against the Trump campaign, and then clearly against the Trump administration. And unfortunately, General Flynn has suffered more than anybody on this, and it's just disgraceful the way the judicial system, because it shows corruptness in the judicial system. We know there's corruptness in the House and in the Senate on the Democratic members, but now there's corruptness in the judicial system. So we had corruptness in the administration, in the judicial system, and in the congressional system, legislative. This can never happen again, Dave.
Well, and Tom, your courage, Ace's courage, has been inspirational to so many people. And in fact, Tom, there is a website that has been created called Blixware, let's get this, blxware.org, blxware. I'm going to go into great detail on this on our subscription platform, but people need to be aware of this. Blixware.org and Tom, I know you're aware of it, but it actually supports everything that you and Admiral Lyons and Bill Binney and Kirk Wiebe and Mary Fanning and Alan Jones and what I have brought forward, that the deep state and their puppets want hidden. And at the top of the page of Blixware.org, this site is created and maintained by former Blixware employees that wanted the truth about Blixware owner Edith Blixith, her U.S. government contracts, and Blixware's work in illegal FBI, CIA, NSA domestic surveillance program to be exposed to the public. And it is a plethora of information put forward by whistleblowers, Tom, that the deep state is going to go catatonic over. And in particular, just in one little graph they have here, why was FBI, CIA, NSA running a domestic surveillance program far off the grid and far away from congressional oversight in the United States, targeting Americans and their businesses without probable cause? The FBI, CIA, NSA domestic surveillance statistics collected and parallel private domestic surveillance program data on the number of Americans hacked and spied on by the United States government. 38,451,112. Number of U.S. businesses hacked and spied on by the United States government, 6,882,119. Number of attorneys and law firms hacked and spied on by the U.S. government, 93,856. Number of Article 3 federal judges hacked and spied on by the U.S. government, 159. This is exactly, Tom, what you and Admiral Lyons and Bill Binney and Kirk Wiebe, Mary Fanning, Alan Jones, and me have put forward and have been demonized for coming through with this, and now it's supported by data from these whistleblowers on that website.
Very detailed data. I saw that for the first time today, and all I can say is it lays it out in such a compelling fashion that, again, I go back to what's taking John Durham so long if we in the public know this? Why is it not happening so the American people know and can make judgments in this very crucial presidential election that if Hillary would have won, we would have never known this. We would have been oblivious to it. Now we have the transparency brought on by you, Dave, and the others, and we ought to include Audrey Russo, who has a show out of New York, along with Mary and Alan. And so the fact is, the world must know, and the American people must know. It is imperative. And there's too much data in the public, and I'm getting very worried about what John Durham's going to do and how fast he's going to execute it. But I was also encouraged, as I said, by the great work that John Radcliffe did this morning on Mornings with Maria and her show. So the word must get out, and that's why what you were leading, and you've been on the leading edge of this in the public forum and the media to get this out, why it's so important to your listeners that what they are hearing right now is what's going to and should legally be presented to the courts very shortly, but they should be well aware of all these facts. And these minor arrests like Klein Smith admitting to it, et cetera, is just a precursor to what's going to happen with the big names, the direct reports to the commander-in-chief, who was in that meeting on 5 January 2017, in which they were going after General Flynn, who, as I said, has borne the brunt of this personally and financially, and why it's so important that the judiciary come through with the right answer and let him go. It's just unbelievable when the Department of Justice drops the charges and you have the legal system in D.C. still trying to, through Judge Sullivan, who obviously must be corrupt, that's all I can say, who persists on this. But the reason he is doing this is because once General Flynn is free to expose all that has happened to him in the Mueller report and everything else, it is going to put another nail in the coffin of the Democratic Party that is doing so many things with the riots we see today, and everything they have done, since their fingerprints are all over this treasonous activity.
You know, Tom, and tell me if I'm wrong, but I believe the whole fake Russian hoax about Trump and his campaign colluding with the Russians, which was a hoax put forward by the deep state, that hoax, the Ukraine hoax, the impeachment hoax, the whole COVID situation, the followed by this Black Lives Matter, Antifa insurrection that they've been involved in. This is all cover for the perpetrators of this attempted coup of Trump, President Trump, and his administration. And the core of the coup is, as Ace put it, was on this illegal surveillance.
Correct. Absolutely correct. They're all related. They are taking advantage of COVID-19. And I think it'll eventually come out that the Obama administration, we know, funded Wuhan, the test lab there in China. And I don't know their involvement yet. But the fact is, all this is tactical deception to cover up what they did against the Trump campaign and administration. And that's why it's so important that we understand in all these cities where the riots are occurring that it is directly attributed to Democratic mayors and Democratic governors who will not suppress these riots. And the American people have got to understand the Democratic Party is behind this, just like they're behind the COVID-19 continuance of it. I mean, I found out just today, Dave, that the total number of deaths directly attributable to COVID-19 is 9,210. The rest had other serious illnesses between age and heart problems, etc. That is only 6% of the COVID-19 deaths were attributed to COVID-19. So the American people have got to understand why these Democratic governors, like in New York, in New Jersey, in Pennsylvania, in California,
don't forget Michigan,
they are doing what they're doing.
Mm-hmm. No, and Tom, the data you just cited on the COVID situation was actually from the CDC, buried in their website, and it was as of this past Friday's the end date. And you're right. You're absolutely right. Only 6%, 6% of the COVID deaths that occurred were solely related to COVID. That 94% of the people who died in this country had significant underlying medical conditions. And on average, according to the CDC, that each of these people that died from COVID had on average 2.6 underlying significant medical issues, which was their ultimate demise.
And yet you've got these governors and these mayors and other authorities that are trying to take the personal rights away from Americans using this information. And COVID-19 as the pandemic is why we cannot open up our economy, our schools, everything. This is all related and is part of the Democrats' effort to cover up the Russian hoax and the conspiracy that they were doing against the current administration. It is the worst and most corrupt act in the United States history, and the American people have got to know it. That's why I keep coming back to Durham. He's got to take more action quicker.
And speaking about more action, President Trump this morning was speaking about possible implementation of the Insurrection Act and bring federal troops in particular as it relates to Portland. Your take on that, Tom?
He should do it. Look, we're on 100 days that we've had rioting in Portland. And look, George Floyd, we still don't know all the facts, but it is beginning to look like he had drugs in his system that would have killed him. that has got to come out. Jacob Blake, he had sexually molested this person. He had a knife in his hands. He was doing it. Whether he should have fired 7 rounds or 2 rounds, that can be debated. But the fact is, none of that is worth all of the rioting and the destruction, what they've done in those towns. And it's primarily, in many cases, against minority owners, small businesses, and it's destroying our economy. We have got to break out of this. Black Lives Matter is a subversive organization, and it should be outlawed, just like Antifa should. Both of them should. Black Lives Matter was formed by 3 Marxists, and they're using the black issue, the racial issue, just like Saul Alinsky would do, as a cover. Wake up, America. We've got to understand what is going on.
You know, Tom, what is interesting is that for the last 3 months, you have not seen individuals that are called Democrats, but they're far from, my mom and dad's Democrat Party when they were alive. They are far from the Democrat machine. They are truly socialist and, as you described, Marxist. When you, over these last 90 days, you have not seen the Joe Biden's, the Kamala Harris's, the you name it out there, Nancy Pelosi's, Schumer, saying this has got to stop. These are not peaceful protests. Instead, you see them bending a knee. You see them doing these made-for-TV events, and you don't hear any condemnation of it. But in the last 24 to 48 hours, Tom, all of a sudden, Biden is starting to slur his words out there from the basement saying, well, I think the riot thing is not a good thing. They're in trouble, Tom, and they know it.
They're in deep trouble. They didn't get a bounce, and it is obvious to the American people. I mean, American people see it. These Democratic mayors and governors have not taken the appropriate action, and I think the president's correct in Portland to use the Insurrection Act, are not taking the appropriate acts to quell them. They are letting it deliberately happen. And this is the Democratic Party today. If we lose this election, it is going to be, our nation is going to be communist.